Welcome back to Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation. I'm Jenny Rudolph. I'm an organizational behavior scholar interested in the things that help us work well solo, in duets, teams, and in our organizations. I also spend a lot of time thinking about what gets in the way of all that. In the final pages of her book, The Fearless Organization, Amy Edmondson answers a number of frequently asked questions about psychological safety. And many of them, as I scanned them, boiled down to, if I create too much psychological safety, won't people just talk too much? Won't meetings just become endless? You know, it sounds really nice to have psychological safety, but I actually have work to get done. And frankly, I can relate. At the moment, I'm working on a large project with a number of my colleagues creating a new leadership course. And I was actually working on it over the holiday weekend because I'm pretty anxious and I want to get it done. And thoughts like this were going through my mind. You know, I just need to tell James, who's the producer of this show, but also one of our amazing instructional designers, I need to just tell James that I need him to do this and this and this. And I need to tell Grace, one of my colleagues, that she needs to do this. And then I have to tell Chris that he has to do this. And the irony, of course, was I'm working on a leadership course. And one of the things we address in the course is leadership styles. And when you do the sort of thing I was just naming of myself, that's a pace-setting style or a commanding style, and can be extremely useful to move things along. But when you have amazing colleagues who have amazing input and could make what you're thinking about way, way better, as I do, I have to figure out how can I both continue to move really quickly on this project, inspire and corral people to do the same, but also keep the situation open enough so that we don't go veering off track, or I don't make a mistake, or they don't collude accidentally and are producing something that none of us can be as proud of as we'd like to be. So what I learned by reading through those questions at the end of the book, The Fearless Organization, is psychological safety isn't the opposite of discipline. It's the partner of discipline. So when we have to get things done, we have to get things done. That doesn't mean you can't do them in a way that skillfully allows people to speak up, share their opinions, and drive the project forward nevertheless. So this week's readiness goal is be ready to balance discipline and openness when the pressure is on. I just got to say one more word about this. You know, I've noticed about myself that the more anxious I get, the more unilateral I get. And so being a skillful leader under time pressure, or being a skillful leader, if, as many of my amazing colleagues in healthcare are, as a patient is deteriorating rapidly in front of you, while also getting necessary input, not missing things, requires a lot of self-awareness, the ability to reset, downregulate your own emotions, etc. So we've spoken primarily about the externally facing work of the Leader's Toolkit that Amy Edmondson introduces in the Fearless Organization. But underlying that is the emotional intelligence, the self-awareness, and the ability to manage one's own emotions. So I want to talk about how do we wrap everything together that we've explored over the last few weeks regarding building psychological safety on your teams with the idea of efficiency. How do we actually get stuff done, yet keep our teams psychologically safe? I've heard Amy Edmondson present enough and now have dug into this Fearless Organization book with you all. And in my own work on creating teams, training teams in healthcare, I've learned that psychological safety is not a, open quote, nice to have. It isn't just window dressing. But when you're in a rush, it can really feel that way. And so what we've talked about over the last few weeks is how do you train yourself to have the routines to notice when you're moving too fast and pause and reset yourself and ask for input? How do you have and plan for the structures in your meetings and on your teams so that you can move efficiently through, for example, a patient resuscitation, or can move efficiently, for example, through a meeting using a really well-structured agenda such that there is time to invite people's voice in from time to time. What we've discovered over the last few weeks is you don't actually have to do some high stakes work like running a nuclear power plant, leading an operating room team, leading a trauma team in the emergency department to learn the hard way how you can get bit in the derriere if you don't leave room for perspectives that you might miss. And so what can we take away from this exploration of creating a fearless team or a little sub pocket of culture right around you where people do feel free to speak up? And perhaps the simplest answer of what we can take away from that is how we frame the role of the leader. One of the ways that we traditionally frame the role of the leader, the default frame of the role of the leader or the boss is the person who has the answers. The boss is the person who gives the orders. What we've discovered over the last few weeks together is an important reframe of that, which is the boss or the leader sets the direction. The boss or the leader has to be the one to hold the container that invites input and clarifies how we can improve. Another traditional frame about what is the boss or the leader's job is it's my job as the boss or the leader to assess your performance, to tell you whether you're doing well or not well. And a reframe of that traditional view is that the leader is the one who creates the conditions for continued learning and excellence. So as someone who's very passionate about high standards and high regard, it's not that I don't think assessment as in, hey, this was the standard and you did this and we need to close that gap is not appropriate. I do think helping each other recognize the ways that we might have fallen short and or recognizing the ways that we're doing well and that keep that recognized and appreciate that and support that. So standards and talking about the standards and talking about how we're doing with the standards matters. And therefore, this frame that I, as the leader, assess performance and there's a problem with that, it's only a problem if I don't pair that discipline or that standard with psychological safety, with high regard. Last week, I talked about those unique nuclear power plants that I studied with John Carroll, the ones who we characterized as being deep learning organizations. They were the ones that had extremely high and extremely exacting safety standards. But when they weren't met, looked with curiosity both at what people said and did, but also explored the mental models and the policies and the procedures, everything behind the scenes that had led to that accident, and were willing to continue to learn and change and grow to make sure that safety occurred. Finally, the last traditional framing of what is the boss's job and what are other people's jobs that are so relevant for our conversation today about the trade-off between discipline and psychological safety, between efficiency and psychological safety, is how do we view others on the team? So a traditional framing, according to Amy Edmondson, is subordinates are people who do what they're told. Respect is shown by deference. Respect is shown by agreement. And the reframing of that is subordinates or others on the team are contributors with crucial knowledge and insight. And so one of the really big shifts in this is a shift that Bob Keegan often talks about, the professor emeritus of education at Harvard Ed School, is, are you a doer of correct or incorrect actions, or are you a meaning maker? And we tend, when we have a traditional view of others, to see them as doers of incorrect or correct actions, rather than recognizing that they're making meaning as they go. And if I approach them with a context that is psychologically safe and I approach them with curiosity, I can find out cool and important things that they know so that we can do things better, even though we need to do them quickly or with discipline. James, before we wrap up, I wanted to just ask you to share some of the thoughts we talked about before we started recording. And one of them was about this trade-off between psychological safety and efficiency. And you had some really great thoughts about that. And I wonder if you'd share them.
Yeah, we were discussing different sorts of meetings where perhaps a person was allowed to share too much at the cost of everyone's time. And that is probably on the leader to set the boundaries a little bit better of what is it we're talking about here. The bigger version of this is I've had so many professional training days as a middle school teacher where you're together. This is hundreds of teachers in a room. This is costing so many hours of time. We have 8 hours to get this consultant's project implemented, and someone starts talking about the fact that the HVAC in their classroom isn't working to this group of hundreds of people. The city is paying tens of thousands of dollars a minute for this thing to happen, and someone starts derailing it to talk about the fact that there's squirrels in their HVAC. True story. And then the other is, a meeting that I was in very recently where someone was sort of going on about like why they didn't want to really want to do something that the team needed, saying, oh, it's going to take so many steps to accomplish this. Like, it's going to take so much of my time and I have so many other things going on. Like, I really don't want to do that because it's going to take so many steps. And at that point, the leader just needed to give an order and say, it is really critical that this gets done. I need you to prioritize it as the next thing that you're going to do. Like, however much time it takes you, that's how much time it takes you. This is the priority for the team. But instead, it just went around in a sort of a circular conversation where the leader kept saying, I really hear how many steps this is going to take you. Like, I really hear what you're saying. I hear that you're really anxious about this. But they never said, and I just need you to do it. And at the end of the day, probably it took more collective time from us just listening to how long this task was going to take than just doing the task would have done. It's not just that we're looking for anything that you want to input about anything at all. It's we want your input under the conditions that we have available to us right now. And part of that is sharing the cost or trade-off decisions that you are making in your head as a leader. It's like, we can do this, we have enough time. We can't do this, we don't have enough time. Being open about that with the group so that they can understand and support you in working more efficiently if it's highly urgent, or discussing further if there is a need to discuss further, or if they don't see the situation the same way that you do. If they say, actually, we would have enough time to do X and Y and Z if we can come to this agreement based on this perspective earlier.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And so, James, this trade-off between discipline and psychological safety, pace setting and psychological safety, commanding whatever kind of leadership style we want to talk about. So that's great. That was James Lipshaw, our producer. Thanks, James. I really get so much out of the examples that you gave there, and also the big picture about being transparent about the trade-offs that are required of the team right at that moment. So speaking of which, I'd like to wrap up with the following thought. Leaders who manage psychological safety well on their teams don't choose between discipline and psychological safety. They learn to practice both at the same time and hold both the time pressure and the need for openness together in some way. So our workout of the week is the next time you're under pressure and working with others and might, like me, make the mistake of thinking, I don't have time to get their input. Try to carve out a few minutes or some small proportion of your work time to create the conditions for better collaboration. And that's going to mean balancing discipline and openness. For example, the workout of the week could be name the time pressures or goals that the team is under, then also invite participation under those conditions, and then thank and support people for participating while also having the guts to shut people down if needed. So, workout of the week. Name the time pressure and goals that the team is under, yet still invite participation within those conditions and thank and support people for their participation while balancing the amount of that contribution if you have to. This has been Curious Now from the Center for Medical Simulation, produced in Boston by our esteemed director and producer, James Lipshaw. If you liked what you heard here, you can work more with me if you wish in our leadership coaching service, or you might enjoy our leadership intensive coming up in August.